Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. So welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined by none other than Desmond Askew, who played Richard Hare. I don't know if anyone knew Richard's surname was Hare, but that's what I've been told it was, Richard Hare. So Desmond, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Nice to see you.
Brilliant. Thank you for coming on. But what we'll do, Desmond, is we'll start the way we start every episode. And if you can just tell us how you first got into acting.
Right, yeah. I was 8 years old, and I was after school one day, and my mum worked afternoons, and so I got a call from my mum in work, and she's just says to me she'd seen this ad for an agency, which was the Sylvia Young'uns agency. And she said that, would I like to do modeling? I think they were looking for models at that time. And I didn't even know what it was, So I asked her, and she's like, you try on clothes, they take your picture and they give you money. So I was like, okay, that's fair enough. So we went for an interview with Sylvia, both me, my younger brother. And she took us onto the agency, and I didn't really ever do much modeling, but kind of got into commercials, did some pop videos and guest stars on TV shows and that kind of stuff. And just, kept rolling along until that was when I was 8. And then by the time I was 11, I was kind of working a lot. So we thought it was a good idea for me to go full time to Sylvia's school.
Yeah, because you were pretty prolific on telly. Without this sounding horrible, you were one of those faces, and you just seemed to be on telly all the time, whether it was adverts or, as you say, the Wham video was one, wasn't it?
Well, it was funny because Sylvia would get phone calls and saying like, "Oh, do you represent anyone like Desmond Askew?" And she'd say, "Well, I actually do represent the book." And they'd say, "No, we don't want him. He's everywhere. We want someone like him."
Right. And because, well, I was just looking at your your very early CV, and it was very sort of rock and roll heavy, wasn't it? Because you had the Bad Boys video, there was the Bill Wyman movie, wasn't there? Digital Dreams, and you were in Give My Regards to Broad Street.
Yeah,
as well. I mean, did you get to meet those people?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was on set with Paul McCartney for a month. I think no, actually, that one we did reshoots. I think, honestly, Paul McCartney was having such a good time with that film that he kept coming up with new ideas and wanted new stuff. So I think the production went over something like 2 years or whatever. But
wow.
A brilliant time. But yeah, I mean, basically at 8 to 10 years old, I wasn't fully aware of the legendary status of these people.
Yeah.
And so my dad, being sort of late 30s, early 40s, was just blown away. He was more starstruck than I was.
Yeah.
Being there with Paul McCartney, with the Stones, it was a big deal for. And then when I did the Wham video, I had my sister, I think, was about 19 at the time.
Right.
So she was like the total demographic for Wham.
Yeah.
So he was like, "You're going to meet George Michael?" And even my wife is from Greece.
Right.
So she was like, when she found out I was in there, I'd never told her. And I guess my mum found it on YouTube and sent it to me, and I showed it to my wife and just said, "Oh, look, check this out that I did when I was small." And she couldn't believe it because he's a legend in Greece.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So growing up, he was literally her number one. And she was like, "Hey, George Michael." And then, funny enough, 25 years later, he was doing a world tour to mark his 25th anniversary in the industry. And I managed to get tickets and backstage passes. And so I took them. And she met him, and she just melted. It was a dream come true. Did
he remember you?
Yes, yeah. Right. I mean, I just said, "I don't know if you'll remember me, but I played you in the Bad Boys video." And he kind of stepped back and took a look like that. "Oh yeah, I remember you."
Oh, brilliant! And then there was one thing that I did want to talk to you about from your early career, and it was really, really, very, very famous, and it was Harry the Spider's coming out party.
Oh yeah. It's not Harry though; it's Harry.
Harry the Spider's coming out. But I think that's the thing that most people would remember you from, because that seemed to be on telly for
Well, it was.
years, didn't
I
it?
mean, I don't even think it was on that long, but it did.
Right,
Like the commercial itself won lots of awards and
right.
really opened a lot of doors for me. People would have me at charity functions as
All
like a
right.
appearance, and all of those other jobs you mentioned, the Bill Wyman, the Paul McCartney, the George Michael, they had all seen me in that commercial, and that's
Right,
why they booked me for their projects. So, yeah,
right.
it was like that's
Okay.
the kid we want. But it was just, I mean, it was just a great idea, and the director was incredible. That was his first commercial that he ever
Right.
shot, and he was winning awards left and right for
Yeah.
how well he'd done with it.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, one of the things I normally ask people about their early career is, did you get to work with anyone famous, or, like big names? And obviously, we've mentioned some there. But you also did things like Up the Elephant and Round the Castle, didn't you?
Yeah,
Jim
that was
Davidson,
fun.
and then I was looking at a couple of things. You worked with like people who were in Grange Hill before you and them were in Grange Hill. There was a thing called Up Our Street,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
and Lee Corns was in that, and
Yeah.
Louisa Bradshaw White was in
Yeah.
that as well.
Well, I
But
mean, Louisa and I, we go way back. We're with Up Our Street. I think we did a couple of commercials together,
right,
and every possible relationship that two kids could have, we would.
right,
We played brother and sister. We
yeah,
played friends. We played twins in one thing. We
all
actually
right,
played twins in one
yeah,
of the Up Our Street episodes, and then when we, got Grange Hill booked it at the same time,
right,
was
yeah.
fantastic because we'd known each other for probably at least 10 years by that point.
Brilliant. And so, was it only television work that you were doing at that time then?
Well, I mean, there were the films, the Paul McCartney and
Right. Yeah.
the Bill Wyman. They were films, but just television. My first theatre, well, my first real time in front of a live audience was probably Up the Elephant and Round the Castle.
Right. Okay.
Though it's TV, it's a brilliant. I miss the sitcom format because it's the perfect like hybrid of the doing theatre work and
Yeah.
doing TV work. So you get the best of both because that you get that audience feedback immediately
Yeah.
and
Brilliant.
just the nerves of going out before them when you've never done this before. You've had your rehearsals, but you've never had a real audience there
Yeah.
before. So
Yeah.
that was probably my first experience of a live audience. And then when I went to Sylvia's school at 11,
Uh-huh.
she used to do this annual show in the summer.
Hmm.
And this was, a really big introduction to theatre, although it was, there wasn't too much pressure on that because it
Yeah.
was all kids doing kind of song and dance numbers and nobody expected perfection except for Sylvia. Actually, she
Right.
was very
Yeah.
hard. But no, it was so that gave me like some experience to my first pro theatre was actually Les Miserables.
Right. Wow.
And they were very nervous about hiring someone who'd never done stage before,
Right.
So, I'd just say to them, it's like, well, I've been in front of a live audience. I did
Yeah.
TV in front of a live audience. I've done Sylvia's shows. About 7 auditions later, they finally kind of capitulated and said, "Okay, we'll have you."
So how old were you then when you did that?
I was 13 by the time I did that.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
so
Brilliant.
that's another one that's just a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And the
And
show's
and
still running. It's crazy.
and like we mentioned Up Our Street there, and was that where you did? Did you do Simon and the Witch? Was that part of Up Our Street?
That was, yeah, one of our episodes. Up Our Street was like a little vignette, 15
Yeah.
minutes every week. And one of the stories we did was the original Simon and the
Yeah.
Witch. And Joe Monroe, who played the witch, was a fantastic actress. It
Yeah.
is a fantastic. But I was Simon, she was the witch, and they talked about like this episode was one of the better ones of that whole season of Up
Right.
Our Street. And they talked about making it into a series, but by the time they got around to it, I was, shooting up, and my voice was deeper, and so okay, we're gonna have to. You've aged out of this role.
Yeah, because there was I looked at that, and I don't know if it was just Up Our Street or just the Simon and the Witch episode, but like the cast of that, it seemed to be like loads of like children's TV sort of legends. Like Fred Harris was there, and
Yeah, no,
Nick.
I mean they had like a little repertory cast,
Yeah.
and whatever the script demanded, it's like, oh, okay, 10-year-old boy, we've got Desmond, 8-year-old
Yeah.
girl, we've got Louisa, or
Yeah.
whatever. But we would all. So I don't think anybody was in all of the episodes. It was
Right.
like a little play every
Yeah.
week, and it's like, oh, okay, I've got this week off because there's no need for a
Yeah.
boy. And
Brilliant.
it was
And
really fun.
because I was just looking at the names and like, like Carol Leader and Vicky Licorice and Kate Copstick. And for
Yeah,
someone like yourself who was a child at that time to then
yeah.
see these people from the telly and then be working with them as well. I mean, you said a little bit earlier you didn't really get the magnitude of the rock stars.
Yeah, they were just like my friends. Like
Right.
I remember Lee Corns long before Grange Hill when we were
Yeah.
doing one of the up house streets, and he had a hacky sack. You remember these
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
balls that you try to keep
Yeah.
up in there, and he would just that was just how he kind of chilled out between scenes or whatever. And I was just kind of like, oh wow, what's that? And the next day he came in and he bought me one, and
Oh, right, brilliant.
like a buddy. So by the
Yeah.
time we were on Grange Hill together, once again, it's like a little community that we'd all.
Yeah.
And the BBC was very good with that. They'd always like to help out their own people who
Uh-huh.
they'd worked with before and knew were solid.
Yeah. Oh, no, quality. And I was just looking again, you were in All in Good Faith with Richard Briers and Pam
Oh,
Ferris as
yeah.
well. Like, and then, there was various other things. And like, you weren't in Grange Hill until, well, 1990, you would have been filming it. Had you ever auditioned for it before then?
Well, I'd never actually auditioned. Yes, I must have auditioned. Because the first job I ever did was a billboard photographic campaign for Stork Margarine.
Right.
After I'd done that day, I mean, it was very much how my mum had described it. That I'd had my photo taken all day, and the photographer, was just, oh, that's great, more of that, do that, oh, fantastic, and you're just getting this constant kind of praise
Yeah.
and love for just. I mean, my role was literally eating a cake.
Right. Okay.
They're paying me to eat cake and telling me I'm great at it. This is
Yeah.
brilliant. It's the rest of my life. And I remember on the drive home, I remember saying, it's like, oh, maybe one day I could be in Grange Hill.
Right.
And that was at 8 years old.
Yeah.
I obviously wasn't even old enough at that point. And then around about when I was 11, when I would have been kind of eligible, I did go for an audition, but it was kind of like it was one of these, I don't even think they were auditioning for specific roles. There was nothing to
Uh-huh.
read. They just wanted to meet kids.
Right.
And so I went in and I met with them, and they came back and they offered me what was in those days called a special extra role.
Right.
So you were background, but every once in a while they'd give you a line
Uh-huh.
or a couple of lines or be featured in some way. And at the time, and I think still now, you were only allowed as a child, if you were under 13, you could only work a maximum of 40 days a year.
Right.
And so this would have taken up my entire 40 days.
Right.
And so we spoke to Sylvia about it, and she said, like, honestly, have confidence in yourself. You're doing so much other stuff right now
Uh-huh.
that you don't want to just kind of sign all of that away just to be on Grange Hill, even though, it was huge. And
Yeah.
every kid wanted to be on Grange Hill.
Yeah.
But, so I actually turned it down then.
Right.
And then, I kind of slipped more into theatre while I was at drama school.
Uh-huh.
And literally within a few months of me leaving drama school, the role for Richard came up. I think I was 16 or something.
Right.
And so this obviously was a principal role, and
Yeah.
I had bills to pay now.
Right. So, so
I,
I'm just going to let you sort your timeline out a little bit there because it went on air in 1991. So you probably were filming it in 1990.
yes,
So
yes.
without being too rude, how old were you at that time?
In 1990, I was 17. So
Right.
I
Right.
left school at 16. My birthday's in December. So,
Right.
I left school in around the summer.
Uh-huh.
6 months later, I turned 17. And it was just after that the season would start. I think it was like February to
Yeah.
November was the season.
Yeah. January it normally went on the
Right.
telly,
Yeah.
like so.
The following year.
Because I was looking as well, and obviously, you mentioned about the child working laws early on, and you got blocks. You were on Grange Hill for 4 years.
Yes.
And there was a total of 80 episodes over the 4 series. You were in 75 of them. So
Wow, was it
like,
that many? I
so
knew
I'm
it was going up there.
so you know the child working laws had obviously it bypassed you at that point, hadn't it? Because
Oh
of your
yeah, at
age and stuff.
16, it all gets. I think you get more days when you get to 13, so
Right.
you're then allowed to work 80 days. I mean, you still have to do your schoolwork on
Yeah.
set and everything, but yeah, once you hit 16, it's like all bets are off.
Brilliant. So when you first started, you were older, like you were playing a fourth year. The fact that you were
Yeah,
17,
yeah.
and you must have known a lot of the people then who you were working with.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, even Kelly George, who I was often with, Paul
Uh-huh.
Adam, Paul Paris, those guys I'd kind of grown up with as well.
Uh-huh.
We'd go to the same auditions. We'd sometimes work together, and yeah, so I knew almost everyone in it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then other people I became friends,
Uh-huh.
like Rachel Victoria Roberts. Josh Fenton,
Uh-huh.
Ian Congdon Lee, they all kind of became friends. But
Right.
because they were, it was very much like different sets for different schools. So like Rachel was Italia Conti,
Right.
Josh was Anna Scher,
Yeah.
I was with the Sylvia Young group. But once you get to a certain age, it's like, oh, we're done with school now. We can cross those lines.
Yeah. So,
And then we,
so to you, it mustn't have been really like, I don't want to say it wasn't a big deal because it was Grange Hill. At the end of the day, it was a massive, massive program.
yeah.
But did you fit in quite easily because you already knew a lot of them there? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there was that. It was definitely, I knew so many people and it was familiar. I'd worked at Elstree Studios
Uh-huh.
before, Wood Studios, but yeah, the other part of it was that because I was now an adult,
Yeah.
technically, I mean, I was only 17, but as far as the work goes, once you're 16, it's you're a grown up. You make your own
Yeah.
decisions, and so there was that as well. So now I didn't have to do the 3 hours of tutoring or whatever,
Right.
which bad side of that is you as an adult you have to work around those kids like no we
Right.
can't do this scene now because the kids have to do their schoolwork and
Yeah.
so I'd have to sit around for 3 hours while
Right.
their maths assignments
Yeah.
but yeah it was all good.
You've mentioned some names there earlier that the people that you were working with, but I said this to Claire Buckfield the other week. The sort of the cohort that was your year group, that was really strong, wasn't it? When you look and the fact that you had
Yeah.
Claire and Julie Buckfield, and you had Rachel Victoria Roberts, Sean Maguire,
Yes.
Paul Paris, Louise Bradshaw White, Rebecca Joy Gilgan, Kelly George. It was a really strong bunch of actors to be working with.
I
Like,
think so. Yeah, I mean, there seemed to be more in our year, more
yeah,
people. And I don't know if that's even the case, but it's it always seemed to me Grange Hill would focus on maybe three, four, five
yeah,
people in each year, and with us we had like 10 or
yeah,
12
yeah.
of people that were like getting really strong
Uh-huh.
storylines and we handling them well. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we'll talk about Richard there because when Richard first came into it, he wasn't introduced as this is Richard. He's a new lad. It was like he was someone that was already at Grange Hill. He
Yes.
was
Yeah.
already a pupil there, and he was one of them characters you didn't really know how to take him at first. Was he a bit of a con man? Was he just telling lies? There was
Right.
all sorts going on, and like selling bits of rock that he said were
Yes.
from the Berlin Wall and things, and then he became sort of quite friendly with Matthew, who was friends with
Yes.
Tegs, and Tegs wasn't buying any of it, was he? He wasn't buying anything that Richard came out with. He said he had this customized radio controlled car, which then mysteriously vanished, and you just think it's just going to be everything's just a lie, but then it did turn up. But
Yeah.
Teg still wasn't happy, and I don't know if it was jealousy from his mate wanting to be mates with someone else.
I think that's
Or
what it was. It was like a bro love triangle.
yeah, yeah. But then because he sort of admitted, didn't he, to Matthew? He said it's not really lying. He said I just get bored. It was like he had an overactive imagination, shall we
Yeah,
say?
like an
Yeah,
ADHD or something where he's just constantly, what can I sell? What can I make? What
yeah,
can I, just this constant need for something exciting, some excitement in his life.
Because then he told them that there was smugglers living next door, and Teg still wasn't having it, was he? But then Teg's left, so obviously Sean Maguire left, and it's like it made it easier for Richard to sort of make Matthew believe what he was telling them, because Matthew never had the voice of reason on on his shoulder anymore. There was this thing about the smugglers, and that was like it was like the main storyline for those lads running through it, wasn't it?
Yeah, it went through the whole year.
Yeah, even though other things would happen, it would always come back to the smugglers were next door. Towards the end, you sort of get the feeling Richard knows that they're not really. And then there was the thing where they got into the shed where the smugglers were, and they found costumes, which Richard then said, "Oh, they're disguises." And then they found a gun as well. And then it was sort of left alone because then they went on the Dartmoor trip.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a fun trip.
I was going to say, you must have had a ball out there, like on that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I remember most is when I think we're running away from what we think is the smugglers. They've chased us.
Yeah,
they've chased us all the way down to Devon. You know. And then we're running and we end up, I think that was the payoff for the whole thing, is like with Richard telling all these porky pies was that I ended up in this swamp or something like
with Ray.
And it was freezing.
Was it?
I do remember that. It was freezing Dartmoor in probably November or something.
Yeah, right. The night before, Richard had been looking for a way to sort of toughen Matthew up a little bit and make him grow up a bit. And he said that he thought he'd seen some lights which were like flashing in the distance, and he said it was like similar to what the smugglers had been using, but they'd got Ray to dress up as the Mad Axeman because Nick had told a story the night before. But it didn't work, and Matthew couldn't understand why Richard, who was his mate, had done that to him.
Yes, he got very upset.
Yeah, but then the smugglers showed up in the school, and it turns out that they were like an acting company.
A traveling theatre group,
yeah, that was it.
There's your costumes, there's your guns.
Yeah, but it was like Richard knew that, because in the end, like Matthew went for Richard, didn't he? And he said, he said, "Don't you ever do anything like that to me again." But as you say, Richard was just trying to sort of toughen him up and make him grow up a little bit. Like it kind of did, if you look at it that way. The fact that he's gone for him. No, there's another thing I like towards the end of that series where the lad from Dartmoor, Jamie, turns up.
Oh yes, yeah.
He says like they said, "Oh, come to school for the day," and he's like, "I'm not going to get away with it." So they're all there lending him bits of uniform for him to get through the day. Because I remember as a kid, very early on when I was watching Grange Hill, there was an episode where Zamo and Jonah went to another school and were like, and I remember thinking at the time, why would you do that? But then that actually happened in my school. The school a lad came to our school from another school and got away with it. I think he did about a week before the teachers got wind.
Well, Cameron Crowe did it, didn't he? Was it Fast Times at Ridgemont High? One of those high school films. Right. He left and he had a job as a journalist, but went back in as a student and just documented everything, and nobody knew. Nobody found it. And he built a career on it. Like that was the start of his career.
Yeah. But I just thought it was dead funny because there's all bits, like one of them's just got a blazer and a tie on, and the other one got jeans on, and I love that. And then, of course, the end of the year was Mrs. McCluskey's leaving do.
Oh yes,
like Gwyneth Powell came on the podcast, and I absolutely just fell in love with her while I was on. And everyone who met her just said, what you saw was there was no side to it. And is that what you found as well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's even actually, I was probably more starstruck meeting her for the first time than I was with a Paul McCartney, because I think Grange Hill was so ubiquitous in people of our ages life that it was almost like you went there. That was your school. If it was an extension of it, you'd come home from school and then you'd watch this other school that you felt a part of.
Yeah,
You had a crush on this girl, or you hated that bully.
yeah.
It really was personal. And yeah, so meeting her was just like, oh wow, this is the head mistress that I've been scared would catch me doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Ever since I can remember, you know.
Yeah. No, she was great. Okay, so then that moves us on to the next series where Richard sort of his business side came out a little bit
Yeah.
more in this one. We'd had the introduction at the start of Natasha coming in, Natalie's twin sister, but then Richard and Maria decided they were going to make fake American trainers, whatever they are.
It's just they have a thing over here, or they used to. Someone told me about it called a bedazzler,
Right.
which is you take something plain and it sticks on kind of like rhinestones or sequins, and we were just bedazzling, like British Home Stores trainers.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it was.
Because obviously there was Miss Janowitz was there at the time, an American teacher, and Ray
Oh yeah.
Ray fancied her, so they took advantage of that with Ray, and they got Ray to pay £120 for a pair of trainers in 1992. By the way, that they must be worth about 700 quid now.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
That was because I looked at it the other day, and £120 in 1992. That's extortion, and he bought them. But strangely enough, he didn't manage to sell many others.
No.
I mean, that was the thing with Grange Hill, wasn't it? There was always a wheeler dealer somewhere
Yes.
in Grange Hill, and it just so happened to be Richard and Maria
Well, we
that
had the
year.
pizza business as well at one point, didn't we? Where
Yeah,
we were selling pizzas on, like basically as
yeah,
middle to the school.
yeah,
The school lunches was lousy, so we'd send someone down to the pizza shop,
yeah.
and
There was always something, and
yeah,
again, like in your school, there was always someone selling something, wasn't
yeah,
there? Whether it were pirate videos or whatever, there was
yeah,
always someone doing something like that. And of course, that year as well, Series 15, the main thing running through it was the like the gang fighting and the feuds between the schools, between
right,
Grange Hill and St. Joe's. And Richard seemed to be the only one worried that things were going to get out of hand. And he tried to, he tried to talk to the lads a couple of times, and it was just falling on deaf ears. So I think Richard just went with it in the
yeah.
end as well, like because he
Oh, it's
was,
like I told you, you might not agree with the war in principle, but
yeah,
you got to fight it or
yeah,
you
yeah,
go.
definitely. And he was quite often the voice of reason because he told Ray that he needed to forget about Miss Janowitz,
Yeah,
even though he was besotted. And then there was the gang fight on the waste ground between Grange Hill and St. Joseph's. Now, when Alan Cave was on the podcast,
yeah.
he talked to me about this filming that scene with the big fight and the fact that they just bust in hundreds of kids from all over.
Yeah.
And he said he was genuinely terrified of a lot of them lads.
Yeah.
They were
Well,
just,
I mean, yeah, because there is something to be said for the type of kids that it's just if they can pop off a punch to one of the Grange Hill, it's legendary status.
yeah, yeah,
I broke so and so's nose, or I knocked this one's teeth out. Whether it be Zamo, whether it be Richard,
yeah,
whichever character, but and sometimes that still happens. Like in London, you see it that people are very well known. Sometimes they won't go certain places because there are people out there that it's just if they can't be their friend, then
uh-huh,
it's like, well, they'll get some kind of notoriety by being their enemy.
yeah,
So yeah, it can be dangerous, and yeah, especially when you're looking at kids as well, they're very sort of vulnerable. But
yeah.
yeah, I
No,
mean, I think the BBC did a good job of looking after us, but
right.
yeah, we wouldn't have wanted to have been left alone.
No, I mean, like Alan Cave at the time, who played Dennis, he was a lot younger as well. He was only
Yeah,
about 11 or 12 as
yeah,
well. But he said he was genuinely terrified by these lads that they just bust in from nowhere. But yeah, and then of course, true Grange Hill fashion, the fight gets broken up by Justine and Chrissy coming and showing everyone Chrissy's baby.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Appealing to common decency there. It's
yeah. And we've talked a little bit about Natalie and Natasha. Richard fancied Natasha something rotten, but when it was her birthday, she just ripped the birthday card up in front of him. She didn't want to know, basically, did she?
No, not for a long time. Not until the diary
Yeah,
business.
oh, blimey, oh, don't worry, we'll get onto that one.
All right, okay.
But yeah, I mean, because it was sort of on and off with her, and then she agreed to go out with him, but then there was the public school boys turned up. Um, by the way, Mark Warren, Nick Fletcher, and Robert Hands as well. So like again, they brought in three tremendous fellas,
Yeah.
playing them like, and then she was asked out by one of them, and she just said yeah, and forgot all about Richard and stuff.
I think she just kind of saw Richard as like a little puppet that she
Yeah,
could,
she definitely, yeah, she
you
got
know,
him to,
I'll keep him close enough that he'll do what I want him to do,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm interested in it.
I mean, she
And then
called
there
him.
was poor Maria was in love with
Yeah,
Richard, and he had no interest in her.
no, no, yeah, we've all been there, haven't we? Do you know what I mean? That was the thing. Natasha was going to babysit with Richard because he had to look after his little brother because
Yeah.
his mum and dad were going to a concert. And I love this thing because Richard said that they're going to see Fleetwood Mac. Who are they?
The irony is, at that time, I loved Fleetwood Mac.
Right.
I'd be listening to them all the time. But
Do
yeah,
you think? Do you think is that why Fleetwood Mac were chosen? Do you think?
it might possibly have been because the writers always had their eyes on us and what
Yeah.
we were actually talking about, and would try to incorporate that. They're very sort of observant and
Uh-huh.
very would use the kids themselves
Yeah.
as a real grounding for these characters. And
Great.
sometimes it'll be a different real kid that they might, oh, that's a great idea, that's a
Uh-huh.
great story, that's a great trait, but we'll put it into this character instead. And
Yeah.
you kind of would see where it was coming from.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Gang fighting ran throughout that series, and the fact Justine's boyfriend, was killed, and for a kids program, again, it was a big thing to take on, wasn't it? And that was the thing with Grange Hill. It didn't shy away from
Oh
things that
yeah,
were
I mean,
affecting people.
even Chrissy's pregnancy was
Yeah.
like a big deal for a 14, 15-year-old girl with one of the sixth formers. Yeah, they were never shy about it. And I think nowadays that might be a bit more difficult because there are so many voices that it's almost impossible not to
Yeah.
offend somebody's
Yeah.
sensibility.
Yeah. Obviously, the trainers ran throughout the series, and they eventually made a big profit of £4 on the trainers. So we're moving on because obviously you did 2 years in sixth form then as well, and you mentioned the diary business and the sixth form episodes. To me, it was all about the hormones, wasn't it? There was so
Yeah,
much going on. Everyone fancied everyone else, and some people didn't fancy, or they didn't fancy them, and it
that's
was
all
there was
very true to life though at that
yeah.
age. Either
Um,
18.
the fact that the diary went missing, but Richard was determined to find it for Natasha because obviously she'd like him then. But then Fran and Maria had their own game going on about and it's just when you look at it, it's just triangles everywhere. It was
Yeah,
just
exactly.
it because like doing my research for this, it was so hard to keep up with. Like literally, it was so hard to keep up,
Oh,
up
I mean, but
with
everyone
it.
as well, with all their own motivations and
Yeah,
who they want to impress or to undermine. It's
yeah.
all very Machiavellian that
I
year.
mean, one of the things I did like about the sixth form, because I don't know, if they would have done it earlier on but they showed them going out and
Yes,
quite a bit and going to clubs and stuff, and obviously when I was in sixth form, that's what we were doing
yeah.
as well. So I thought that it wasn't just the school and it wasn't just them down the park. It was the fact that they were young adults by now, and they were doing things and
Well,
stuff.
that was the beauty of it with going from, as you say, 11 years old, the first years up to the sixth formers,
Yeah.
is there was something for everybody, and
Uh-huh.
it's genius if you think about it to get you know, you've got 10-year-olds and 18-year-olds
Yeah,
watching the same show. That's incredible.
yeah.
It's,
And then and then
and also not just watching it. I mean, maybe the same. You know, you might have 10-year-olds to 60-year-olds watching Baywatch, but they don't feel as
yeah,
involved and as absorbed into it.
yeah,
Grange Hill really kind of
yeah,
had that. Everybody had someone they identified with
yeah.
of every age group.
Definitely. Definitely. And Maria asked Richard out on the pretense that she was going to ask everyone to go to this club. And for age, it was just the two of them. And they went for a dance. And and then everyone else turned up eventually because Richard had mentioned it to Justine.
Right.
But it was like, I watched it and it was just like a slow dance. But it was, You're Ready for This by Two Unlimited. And I'm thinking, you wouldn't be dancing like that to that song. So, like when, because programs have to get they have to get the rights for the music. Was,
Yeah.
was was music playing when you did those things?
No, almost never is, but
Right.
so they can get clean audio of the people speaking. Many times, what they'll do is if they do know in advance what track they're going to use, they'll play 10, 15 seconds of it at top volume to get you in the mood and then cut it as the scene begins. Just so, as I say, the sound department can get clean audio and then they'll lay it in over the top afterwards.
Right. Okay. Because I watched it and I just thought, I'm not convinced that that's the music.
No, I don't think we even do. With that, I'm not even sure we even got the little advance pump of it. You know,
Yeah,
it's just
right.
we didn't know what they're going to be playing, so it's just like, oh, dance romantically or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they put that over. Wow, that looks like they're so into each other. They don't even care what's playing.
Yeah, it was then discovered that Nick had pinched the diary and done all the photocopying and stuff, and everyone had fallen out with each other by this point.
Yeah.
Then good old Ray came to the rescue, brought everyone together by getting them involved in his brother's wedding, and I love that episode just because there's so much goes on in it from the start to the end.
That script, I still remember to this day. The last line of that script is one of the greatest lines I've ever seen. I've ever read, and it's just a stage direction. It's not even a character's line, but it says at the end of that episode when the Ray's brother's ex is at the back of the church and she's all dressed in black, and the line in the script was. Vicky sits at the back of the church, dressed all in black, looking cool as a cucumber, but much more sinister. I'm like, well, how sinister is a cucumber? You know, it's a genius line. Cool as a cucumber, but much more sinister.
Not just a sinister cucumber, a cool sinister cucumber.
Yeah, exactly.
As well, yeah. I love that episode. The fact that Nick and Richard went to get suits. And the only suits they could get were proper like groom and best man suits. So when they arrive at the church, the priest tells them to sit on the front row. I just loved all that, and especially throwing Kelly George and Denzel Kilvington into the mix as well. Like,
Denzel was
just brilliant.
Amazing. He did so well with that role. It's one of those where you kind of take it up to the edge of what's believable.
Right.
Don't ever cross that line, but it's really on the edge.
Yeah.
What a great character and what a great performance.
Yeah, he was brilliant in that role. Like, yeah, as I say, I love that episode. It is probably one of my favorite episodes, to be honest. Like,
it was one of those. I think every like the Dartmoor in season 14. There were event episodes that kind of everything the season had been building towards this. Wedding was one of those event episodes, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And you get all the cast in, don't you, as well? I mean, I know the teachers have their own thing going on that day as well, but all the kids, regardless what year they're in, all ended up at that wedding, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then, of course, so we move on then to your final year in Series 17. And there was only a few of you left. Majority of people left that year. So Natalie and Natasha had gone, Fran had gone, Nick had gone, and Ray had gone. And there was really only Richard, Maria, and Justine left in the sixth form. And Richard was now going out with Maria as well. But one of the first things that happens in that series for Richard is he bumps into Mr. Robson. And Mr. Robson said, "Oh, where are you going?" He said, "I'm just going to play snooker down the snooker centre." And Mr. Robson says, "Would you fancy a game?" And I just thought, you couldn't do that now because just a
No,
teacher just saying to one of his students, "Oh, let's go for a game of snooker." It's just it's just
no.
bizarre, like
But it
um,
was I mean, it's just a different world when you
yeah,
think that's not even about the show, but just how much stuff has changed. Because
yeah,
I think, maybe if you were 17, 18 and your teacher says you want fancy a game of snooker, there was no harm in it.
no,
For us. But I think, obviously there are people out there who do want to harm
yeah,
children, but there's the perception that people are.
yeah,
I mean, I taught myself. I taught at Sylvia Young,
right,
and I could not, I might have a kid with an audition on, I'm teaching on a Saturday or something. The kid has an audition Monday or Tuesday of the following week. And they would ask me to run their lines with them and to give them some direction and blah, blah. But I was always very, very mindful of the fact that I cannot be alone in a room with this
yeah,
child. I can't. I have to ask at least another child to stay with us after the class to work on their script. But yeah, and that was. I just think that it's kind of become more and more and more. So it's as not as bad, obviously, but there's so much motivation to protect the children, but also I think for any adult who might
yeah,
be accused of something like that,
yeah,
when they're innocent, it's awful. I mean, there's no coming back from it. I
no,
really believe that if you get kind of accused of that kind of misconduct, it
yeah,
sticks no matter what. No matter if there's video evidence to the contrary, it
yeah.
still sticks.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
So
And
yeah,
that's what I was thinking. But when I saw that, and I just thought, oh my God, just imagine that now. Like that would lead to a completely different story, wouldn't it?
oh yeah. I
At
mean,
the time, it was a nothing storyline, but
yeah, no, I mean the teacher would be.
nowadays it would lead to something. So like,
Oh, I mean, even when I was teaching another time, there was one of my students was in a play, and it
right,
was a fair. I think it was in Reading or something, so
uh-huh,
a fair way out of London. And I was her drama teacher, and she's in a play. It makes perfect sense for her to ask me to come and watch the play. But she also had another drama teacher, and I said, "Look, if we can both go together,
uh-huh.
we'll come and see your play because that alleviates some of
Yeah,
that. I mean,
definitely,
not
yeah,
all of it necessarily, but yeah, I wanted to say I was proud of her achievements. I wanted to see her perform in this play, and
yeah,
so I got
definitely.
another teacher to go with me, and it was all good. But even that now is just you got to be really, really careful.
Now, Richard's main storyline in the last year was more about Maria and the relationship with Maria and the fact that Maria was finding her own identity. It starts off quite. She just starts wearing black and her eye makeup's a little bit darker,
Yeah,
and she's picking up like jewelry, which Richard's saying, "Oh, it's rubbish." And then she goes full goth, and
yeah,
Richard has a really hard time dealing with it, didn't he? And so did Maria's dad, had a really hard time. And there's a conversation where Richard goes round to her house and they're talking about Maria like she's not there.
right.
And she is like, and it was very obvious then that it wasn't going to end well, was it? Let's be honest,
No.
it wasn't going to end well there. But he did convince Maria to join the choir, um,
Yes.
and they went to East Germany.
Oh,
Um,
that was fantastic. Because
did
I
you
mean, what a way
did you
to
actually
finish.
go?
Oh yeah, we were
Right,
in a
okay.
town on the East German Polish border called
Wow.
Görlitz. And we were there. I think it was about a week we were there,
Uh-huh.
but just what an experience! I mean, it was. I don't even think. No, I think the wall had come down by the. Yeah, of course, because
Right.
we were selling the bits of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, but it was. I mean, it was still very, very much like that. The whole vibe was still very sort of Soviet and authoritarian, but just really, really interesting and beautiful place. Just gorgeous, and
Yeah.
once again, that event episode where the whole season had been
Yeah.
leading to,
I
and
mean,
we were another one I was kind of starstruck with was who wasn't on camera, Jonathan Cohen, who had done music for every kids show the BBC
yeah.
had done, and he was kind of organized our choir
Yeah.
and taught our parts and was the musical director
Yeah.
for that episode. And once again, this was just a guy who was a legend to me. He'd
Yeah.
been part of children's television for my whole childhood. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then when they were there, that was when sort of Richard and Maria, talked and decided that it wasn't that they were going to break up but stay friends because Maria had spent the night with someone else, although nothing had happened
Right. Yeah.
back in England. But yeah, they decided to break up and stay friends. And then the series ended, and Richard left Grange Hill. And though obviously, age-wise, it was the right time for you to
Yeah.
leave. But how did you feel about leaving?
Well, I mean, I missed it because it was something that was just it was a constant and I guess it probably wasn't as constant as I thought it was because,
Right.
as you say, there were other years. I mean, like I'd seen Sean Maguire leave, and he was a big, very well followed character, and then I'd seen other people leave. When you say about the Fran and Chrissy, all of these
Yeah.
characters that had left when before really they were aged out of the series, but it still felt constant to me. And I guess if I hadn't been asked back for sixth form, or if I hadn't been asked back for the second year of sixth form, something would have come up. I would have done something different. But it did feel very constant, very familiar, it felt like home. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so confident in our surroundings there. That was what I mean. We could just walk up to the producer's office, and the door was always open. And we'd walk in and say, "Oh, Albert, can I talk to you about this?" Or, "Albert, we have an idea for a charity thing." Like, there was one time Louisa and I wanted to do a parachute jump for children in need, and most of the time Albert was very was very encouraging of anything we wanted to do for charity. And where he said, "Desmond, don't be ridiculous. You can't get this production insured if you two are jumping out of planes, But and he was, I mean, Albert was a legend as well. We'd go into his office and just to chit chat sometimes. But I think it was 5 to 4 or whatever. Pingu would come on, the little animated penguin, and he'd turn on the TV in his office, and we'd all have to watch Pingu for 5 minutes.
I love that.
And then he'd turn the TV off, and he's like, "Okay, where were we?"
Brilliant. So could you talk to him about your character and what you think your character should be doing? Did you have any sort of input in that?
Yeah, I mean, if there was anything that maybe we didn't feel comfortable, and I mean, there was never anything that made us feel uncomfortable personally. For me as an actor to be good, you got to convince other people that what you're doing is real. And in order to convince other people, the first person I have to convince is myself. And if I've been kind of playing this character with this core belief, and suddenly he does something completely different with no explanation, then it's going to be hard for me to convince myself to be in that character. And so things like that, they were very welcoming, very open door policy about that kind of thing. And most of the time they would get what they initially wanted, but sheerly through talking and sheerly through explaining, and say, well, the reason we're doing this, or the reason we think your character has done this 180 is because this might be happening in their life. And it's more that explanation and just to make me feel good about it. I mean, they pay me to say the words they write. I've always been very realistic about that. But at the same time, I want to do a good job. So I need that explanation. I need to have those chats with directors, or in the case of a long running show, more likely the producers. But I think they really, they didn't treat us like kids, I guess, is the takeaway, is that they really, gave us autonomy over what we were doing, over our characters. And so they had the ideas, but at the same time it required everybody to sign off on them, I think. Really to be given that much respect at that age is incredible.
Definitely.
Really confidence.
So you left Grange Hill, and did you know, I mean, obviously because you've been doing it for that long, but did you know that this is what I want to do, I'm going to carry on doing this? Because I know some people leave and it's not what they want to do.
No, no, no. This was something from, as I say, from that first job where I was eating the cake.
Yeah,
It was. I knew that being in front of the camera was my thing, and
yeah,
it was. I was always happiest, either but in front of camera or in front of an audience. It was
yeah.
just. I loved being able to have that effect on people, whether it was in Les Miserables, where I'd have people at the stage door still with like ladies with mascara down their cheeks. I cried so hard when you died,
Right.
and it's I didn't want to make you cry, but at the same time, I did give you that couple of hours of escaping all the problems and nonsense in your life. You can just put it out for like it's an incredible power to have,
Yeah,
really, or to make people just laugh when they might have a relative who's close to death or something, but just for that half an hour of watching that show or for that 2 hours of watching that play in the theater, they do manage to just extricate themselves from the challenges of life and just be in it, be
yeah,
surrounded by that.
yeah.
So that was always what attracted me most. I loved it.
And obviously, you have carried on after and looking at like your CV sort of after Grange Hill with the island and the bill, but then your big thing was 1999 when you were in Go. Would you say that
Yes.
that was like sort of? I hate using this phrase. Is that what changed things for you? Would you say?
I mean, it certainly changed my day to day life and my surroundings because
Right.
I'm no longer in London, and it was it was an incredible experience. That whole ride of,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was the same as everybody else. That Hollywood wasn't on the radar. It's
Right.
just maybe EastEnders would be or
Yeah.
Emmerdale or something, but it's like, you don't think Grange Hill and like next step is Hollywood, but I
Uh-huh.
after Grange Hill, I kind of went back into theatre for a while, and I remember I'd just gotten back from, I think it might have even been Panto, but I just
Right.
jumped
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
like 12 weeks down in Portsmouth or wherever. But I came back and there was this script on my mat with all my other mail, and
Uh-huh.
I opened it, and my agent had called me before I'd left the South Coast and said, "We got this script for you. Take a look at it. Let us know if you're interested. We'll put you on tape for an audition. The director's in LA." And I read this script and I was just like, this would be the coolest thing to do. Is
Yeah.
threesomes and Ferraris and Las Vegas. I just thought this would be amazing. So and then I was lucky enough that I fit the director's vision for that role and got hired. And then the casting director actually said to me, you could do well here. He
Yeah.
said you should consider, but it's not. I mean, it's not like it was now where you can have a Zoom meeting with someone
Yeah.
5,000. You had to send a videotape, literally a VHS, put it in the mail, wait 2 or 3 days for FedEx to
Wow.
get here.
Yeah.
Then he would have to look at it and then maybe give me a call with some direction. And then I make a new tape and then have to send that one. And it was just so slow. So the casting director said, you have a future here, but you have to be here.
Yeah.
So I didn't have too many ties. Like I had to
No.
sell my house, but I didn't have a wife and family that I could
Hmm.
that I would have to drop in order to come here or
Yeah.
bring uproot from schools and stuff. So I just thought, why not? I mean, I love it here. I love the weather.
Yeah.
Usually, anyway, it's been a bit of a cold and wet winter this year, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I thought, why not? It's just one of those things when life hands you an opportunity like that, you've got to take it. It was the same with going to Sylvia's drama
Yeah.
school. Instinctively, I wanted to go to the local comprehensive where all my friends were going to go. And I got this offer, and it's something you think like, that's my instincts here are those of a child.
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity, and I need to look at it in an adult way.
Yeah.
And wherever it may lead, because otherwise you find yourself maybe 30, 40 years later thinking, oh, if
Yeah.
only I.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the worst thing, isn't it? Is
Yeah,
having that sort of I should have done it. You've done quite a bit then, and you were in Roswell, and you were in Charmed,
yeah.
and I've never watched this because I read the synopsis on it. I thought I can't watch that, but you were in the Hills of Eyes as
Oh
well.
yeah. Oh, it's brutal.
um,
Yeah, yeah, at all squeamish, don't watch it.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I saw a screenshot of your character earlier on today, and I just thought, no, I've made the right decision not watching that film. Um,
That was
yeah.
5 hours of prosthetics to get it. It's
How long? Sorry.
5 hours of.
Wow.
I would only actually shoot for a couple of hours each day because it was 5 hours to get on all of that makeup and prosthetic.
Yeah.
Spray painting my body like I was some kind of work of art or something.
Right.
Incredible effects, and it would take an hour and a half just to get everything off, just to get
Wow.
scrubbed off at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, blimey. As I say, apologies, I've never seen it, but there's no
Don't
way
worry.
there's no way I'll be able to. But as an actor, when you get a script like that, like, what's your thought process when you realize just what it's going to be like?
Well, to be honest, the script doesn't even begin to explain what you see on screen.
Right.
And I hadn't seen Alexander, the director, I hadn't seen his first movie at that time, which is also fairly
Right.
blunt.
Okay.
I'd seen the original Hills Have Eyes, and that's scary, but not quite so graphic.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but yeah, when I saw this, I mean, I was amazed it didn't get an X rating. It was, and then someone explained to me that often what they do is when they submit it to the, is it the MPAA, the equivalent of the BBFC,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, rating, and the trick they use is that they'll submit it without audio because
Right.
all their rating is what you're actually seeing.
Yeah.
And so if they submit it, you don't hear like the crunch of bones or the tearing of flesh or
Yeah.
And so they kind of oh yeah, well this is a bit nasty. We'll give it an R rating. If they'd have put the audio on it, this would have been an X rating.
Right. Okay. No, brilliant. Um, and then you've carried on acting, but you've also now got another career within acting as well. Which when I told me mate the other day that I was going to be interviewing you, he said, "Oh, he's a cracking video games voiceover. He does all kinds."
Yeah.
So yeah, so how does that come about then?
Well, I basically I had a friend who was a casting director for Disney.
Right.
And I just kind of mentioned in passing that it'd be great to do one of those animated movies that they have such great characters and great voices in them. And she's like, well, in order to do that, we usually go to voiceover agents because I hadn't had a voice agent the whole time I'd been here. And so she hooked me up with Sutton Bath and Venaria, one of the premier voiceover agents. And I went in with them and met with them and they agreed to represent me. And it really started to become more than the animation. I started to book the jobs in the interactive, in the video game space.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, you get up in the morning, you go in there with your coffee, you don't need to shave. It's just, you don't even need to learn your lines. You can read them from the script. But I have a lot of fun doing those because, as you say, there's such a variety of characters where sometimes they'll use the same actor.
Right.
I'm working on one at the moment, actually. My last session was last week, and I think I probably did 15 to 20 characters.
Wow. Because I mean, you've been in some big franchises, haven't you?
Yes.
Like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor, Resident Evil. Is it easier for you now as well? Because obviously it's more voice work. Is it easier for you to walk down the street?
Oh yes, oh certainly, yeah. Although I don't know if you've ever heard the song "Nobody Walks in LA."
Right.
You drive everywhere, so I rarely walk down the street.
And am I right in thinking that you are officially a US citizen as well now?
I am, yeah. I got 2 passports.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, very James Bond to have multiple passports.
I mean, they do say your real name on them, don't they? Both of them.
Yes, they do. They
Right. Okay.
have the same picture. I just renewed my American one. I'd had that for 10 years,
Right.
so it's about to expire. So I just got a new one. No, I renewed my American one last year, and I just renewed my British one.
Right. Desmond, we are coming to the end of the interview, and I've just got a few questions about Grange Hill. Now, before I do them, are you still in touch with anyone from Grange Hill?
No, not on a regular basis.
Right.
I mean, a few years ago when I was still kind of doing the social media thing a little bit. I'd just chat with someone once in a while, have a little DM conversation with
Yeah.
Louisa or Rachel, but yeah, no, not generally. I mean, and then also the last few years, I went back to England in 2019 and
Right.
haven't been back since because then COVID
Yeah,
happened.
of course. Yeah.
No, there's no way I was going to deal with transatlantic flight
No.
in era. Just too much hassle. But
Yeah.
yeah, so my wife and I are going to be making our return to Europe this summer.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, so I'll ask you these questions about Grange Hill then. So last year, I don't know if you saw this over there, but there's been talk of Phil Redmond is writing a Grange Hill movie.
Oh
Um,
wow.
what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, why not? The show has a following that, as I said before, it used to be 10 to 18-year-olds, but now they've all grown up.
Yeah,
And then, so the younger generation would be like, what's all this stuff my dad's talking about?
yeah,
I gotta check this out. But I think the mums and dads, I think it'd be a great family experience for,
yeah,
the
brilliant.
older
And
generation.
if you were asked, would we see a return of Richard?
I'm sure we could come to some arrangement.
Brilliant. What do you think Richard would be up to now?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I think he would be. He always had that kind of duality to his personality. So he'd probably have a very solid, responsible job, and
Uh-huh.
still be trying to pull some scam on the
Yeah.
side. I mean, probably a bit of both.
He'd
Yeah.
be, he'd be trying to make it as a CEO somewhere, wouldn't he? Like he'd be trying to do something. Yeah.
Or I mean, even just kind of like launching an app that's going to change the world.
Yeah.
He works as like an accountant.
Yeah.
Or something.
Oh, brilliant. Now, you mentioned it earlier on when you were very young, you said you think I'd be in Grange Hill. So, other than Richard, who was your favourite character on Grange Hill?
Uh, I probably would be cliche and go for Tucker because
Right.
he
Okay.
was the man when I was watching it, when I was starting to watch it.
Uh,
Yeah,
brilliant.
everybody when we used to play Grange Hill in
Right.
the
Okay.
playground, and all the boys would want to be Tucker.
Yeah.
No, you were Tucker yesterday. I'm going to be Tucker today.
And so, if you couldn't have played Richard, which other character would you like to have played?
I kind of like Josh Fenton's character, Mauler.
Mauler. Yeah.
The bully. I mean, I think he did it really well. We became very, very good friends for a long
Right.
time.
The,
But
thi- the thing I liked about Mauler was he was a very different bully to what he'd had in the
yeah, a
past.
bit more cerebral than you.
Yeah, and a bit more comedic, wasn't he, than
Yes.
like what you'd had before? Like, but that's great. Okay, so then the final question, Desmond, why do you think there's still such affection for Grange Hill?
As I say, I mean, we're talking like an entire generation. This was when number one, TV was a lot bigger. You didn't get to choose your entertainment as much. You had three, four channels, and it was just a bigger deal. Even primetime shows, like they were events.
Yeah,
Coronation Street, EastEnders, they were big events back then. And I think it's kind of how they say, like get them when they're young. Is that we felt such a part of it as an audience. I'm talking about long before I was ever in it. I
uh-huh.
felt so engrossed in this show, and like I was a part of it. I mean, it really felt real.
Yeah,
That's comes that so. And I think when you've grabbed people's attention at that age from sort of 10 to 18, these are really formative years, and so they stay with you forever. And that's why I think maybe the movie would be a great idea because
yeah,
mums and dads taking their kids, and the kids seeing something brand new that is
uh-huh.
obviously going to be more today and more up their street. But at the same time, the adults thinking, oh, this is just the same style and the same essence of what I grew up with. I
Yeah,
think it'd be a great bonding experience for
yeah,
families.
definitely, definitely. Well, Desmond, thank you so much for
My
coming on.
pleasure.
I think it's what is it midday where you are? It's
Yeah, yeah,
nearly it's yeah, just coming on to 8:15 over here. But
I
yeah, but
have a
no.
beer and a nice evening, and I'm gonna get another cup of coffee.
Well, thanks again for coming on. Giving us your experiences of your
No
time
problem.
on Grange Hill. It's been great talking to you. And for anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.